Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Hot Wash. My guest today is Brink Fidler, the CEO of Defend Systems, and he's also a former law enforcement member and a member of the Drug Task Force here in Nashville. I've known Brink for a couple of years now. A super awesome guy and a professional in the active shooter space now. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about his time serving in law enforcement and what he's doing now and how he prepares to take him and his clients to the next level. Brink, go ahead and introduce yourself and take it away.
Sure, yeah. So, yes, real name actually, Brink Fidler. If you ever meet another one, I'd love to know. I spent most of my career in narcotics work here in Nashville. It's just a different aspect of most other realms of law enforcement because you get paid to break in places every day. And of course, oftentimes forcefully, but sometimes surreptitiously too. So when it's your job to get around security or through it, it's a good base for a consulting company. And so after I retired in 2015, I founded Defend Systems, and we specialize in physical security consulting and active shooter mitigation training for everything from schools to corporations to healthcares to nonprofits, to community centers, assisted living facilities, law firms. I mean, our clients just are kind of all over the place. Yeah, because you can't really turn on the news without one of these happening somewhere else.
Yeah, what really made you take the transition from retiring from law enforcement and going into this work? What was the catalyst moment for you?
A few different things contributed, but we traveled a lot. You never really knew when you left for work every day when you were coming home. That's trying on a family and kids. And then there was a changing of the guard, if you will, in the district attorney's office. And my board of directors for the Drug Task Force was me and the chief of police here in Nashville and then the district attorney. And so the prior DA and prior board all pretty much saw eye to eye on things, and then there was a lot more tension with the newer member of the board. And so between that and again, just the pressure and wanting to see my family more, it was just a good time to step out and pursue something else. So.
And how long were you on the force for?
18 years.
18 years. That's impressive. Tell me a little bit about the training that you went through. I mean, there's a lot on the news today about the training and the real-world scenarios that police officers have to go through, but talk to me a little bit about your entry-level training and then what you did over those 18 years that kind of took you to the pinnacle and allowed you to serve on the Drug Task Force.
Sure. Of course, in Metro Nashville, all police officers go through a 26-week training academy where everybody gets the same training. What you get beyond that really is up to you, with the exception of in-service every year. I learned very quickly that I worked in the housing projects by choice. That's the areas that needed the most help, really, right? And I saw really quickly that narcotics was behind 85% plus of all the crime there is. So I knew I wanted to get into narcotics work pretty quick. But they do a lot of high-speed tactical entry stuff and really obviously dangerous stuff, sometimes no-knock warrants, right, and things like that. So I started doing a lot more on my own as far as training, room clearing and firearms, going to classes, paying out of my own pocket sometimes, or getting the unit to pay for outside training to come in. Because, you really need to be not complacent, but comfortable, right? I mean, you are a pilot, so you get this. You're not overconfident, but you need to be confident in your skill set to conduct your mission accordingly. And so I didn't need to be going in on tactical entries, dynamic entries, worrying as much as focused, right? And for me, the answer to that was training. Prior to being a supervisor, I was a point guy, so which drove my family crazy. But that's where I was most comfortable was, I couldn't control what the people in front of me did and how it affected me, but I could control what I did and how it affected them, right?
Yeah.
And so that was big for me, was the firearms training, and that led to everything from vehicle jams to you name it, being able to, again, you get this because of what you did, but stay calm and focused when there's a whole lot happening around you that's really dangerous,
Yeah. So you went through some level of CQB training. Obviously, you're the first man in the stack, which first and second man is a pretty risky position to be in when you're doing room clearing. From the last, 10 or so years before social media and a lot of these technology tools came out, what were you guys using to go ahead and pinpoint the drug dealers and the people who are doing nefarious activities without those tools? And how did you couple the technology you had with your training in CQB and driver and tactical training?
Well, phones have been around a long time, right? And and the ability to track phones has been around for a while. At the drug task force, especially, the primary thing we did was wiretaps, was phones, and so we used phones for a lot more than just listening to calls, though, right? I mean, gathering intelligence, and oftentimes we'd be able to pinpoint stash houses and things like that by tracking phones and doing ping orders, what are called ping orders on phones. So that technology's been around a while, and we use the daylights out of it. Now the privacy issues obviously come in, which is where we had to get court orders to do all that, because there's really not anything more invasive besides maybe me putting cameras in your house than listening to your calls, right, or tracking you. And then vehicle trackers, there were a lot of late night crawling around missions, getting under people's cars without their Doberman eating you alive, or getting past their fence and their security alarm and their motion lights and all that kind of stuff. And then there's covert cameras of all sorts out there, and people are that interested, they can Google it. I don't want to give too much away because a lot of it's still in use. But so we were able to capitalize on that. And then even the social media stuff, even if they went dark on their phones, oftentimes the monitors, the civilian monitors that we paid to help listen to calls and stuff while we were doing surveillance, they'd get on their social media and find out exactly where these guys are.
Yeah.
I mean, they leave their burners at home because they don't want to be tracked by the police. Then they put on Facebook exactly where they are, and so we'd capitalize on that too.
Yeah, that's interesting. We, without getting into it, we utilize similar processes in the military, but it's just interesting to see, how advanced some of the criminals are and how unadvanced or unaware some of them are about the tools that they're using to do the activities that are obviously illegal or nefarious. So that's interesting points that you bring up.
Yeah. So side note, we were the first agency in the country to successfully complete a wiretap on a Google Voice number. DEA in California had tried it and were not successful in figuring out the technology. And so the drug task force here in Nashville was the first one to do it. And that guy was pretty clever. I mean, it took us a while to get it. Yeah, it's just different technology than your IMEI number on your phone and all that kind of stuff.
Because IP address focused, voice over IP, some technology.
And where all that goes before it lands on their phone. And so, it was, they're always coming up with more clever ways, obviously, to avoid the good guys. And then the good guys are always coming up with clever ways to detect it. So
that's interesting. So before we get into some gear and some training very specific on what you've used and how you implemented it, let's not forget to do one of your high-risk mission debriefs or after-action reviews synopsis of one of your missions you were on towards the end of the interview. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the courses that you went through. We talked about driver's training, we talked about CQB training, but is there a particular course that you did with the DEA or did with a drug task force that was super beneficial for you that carried you through the end of your career and you're still used today? For me, it's survival school. And most people in Army Special Ops or Special Operations will tell you that's probably a foundation setter for how people carry themselves and how they evaluate their resiliency. So talk to me a little bit about something that you've done in the past specifically and how you implemented it with the drug task force.
Yeah, I guess the training that stands out the most to me was the firearms and tactics advanced training, the room clearing. There's a big difference if you're a point guy versus not on all sorts of stuff. And so from a leadership perspective, I mean, you're leading that team. Even though the supervisor's there and they're somewhere alongside the stack, the point guy is dictating pretty much what everybody behind them does, right? And so it builds a good foundation for leadership skills when your team is relying on you to lead. I mean, if you're put in that position and you choose to be there, you have to lead. And I was a supervisor in narcotics, and then was asked by the DA and the chief to take over as the director when the old director retired. And so I was in a leadership role a lot of my career, and that to me has carried really well over into the business world. Also, it's how to treat people and how to communicate well with people, and not be asking other people to do something you're not willing to do yourself, kind of thing, right? I mean, to be honest, the best people skills I ever developed was probably the worst job I ever had, which is a bouncer in college on the strip at UT, where you're dealing with drunk people. Oh my God. But as far as people skills go, if you can deal with a drunk on a game day at UT, you can deal with pretty much anybody. And so the two of those things really pass through to the foundation of what I try and do now, but also the decisions I made in law enforcement, and to be able to have successful cases and missions and things like that. You know, you have to develop good relationships. We would do 50 plus search warrants over 3 days, and oftentimes 8 or 9 different states. So you can imagine the logistics and the relationships you have to be able to fully execute something like that.
Yeah.
You know, and that all goes back to people skills and communication skills.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Hot Wash. Before we get back to the interview, I wanted to mention 2 great charities that we're supporting. One is the Night Stalker Foundation, which supports 160th Special Operation Aviation Regiment soldiers, families, and contractors who are serving here and abroad. The next organization is Tomahawk Charitable Solutions. This organization was founded by naval special operators and supports a wide variety of local causes here in Nashville and ones nationwide. You can check them out at tomahawkcharitableSolutions.org. Now back to the interview. So we talked a little bit about how you were the point man and you were a leader, but I think our viewers really like seeing the difference between tactics in terms of how special operations units do it, how SWAT teams do it. So do you typically have the first guy in the stack, the lead, to see breach, or do you have a breacher come in and breach and then the lead guy goes through?
So as we stack up typically at the van to approach the house, you got your stack in order, and then your ram and your pry guy or gal, in our case, a lot of times our pry was a gal, would be right alongside you, because you're running cover for them, right? You got the offensive weapon, they're holding tools. I mean, they're not doing this approaching the house, so they're really vulnerable, and it's on you as the point guy to protect them and watch them. And so typically what we would have to do is, a lot of these guys would have security doors, right? So you'd have to have a pry to pop the outer door that swings towards you. Obviously, you can't ram in a door that swings out. And so they're really vulnerable, but we'd also have the pry person do the knocking and outs, right? They got a pry in one hand, the knocking and outs is required unless you apply for a no-knock warrant. And so I'm watching the door, the windows around the doors, basically just watching them and ready to lay down fire if they start taking rounds while they're breaching, because they're vulnerable. I mean, very vulnerable.
So did you have a ballistic shield? Like, go into some more of the kit you guys had?
No, we didn't run shields. We ran just heavy armor, you know, just heavy plate. Of course, back then, armor's gone a long way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was all level 4 or 3A in plates, but then you had the arm guards and the neck guards and the groin guards.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's umpire.
You know, old school, like the Velcro with the snaps all over it. You know, I mean, it's come a long way, thank God. That stuff was heavy and very uncomfortable. But you know, a lot of people think of making yourself smaller, and well, no, you'd want to face the target wearing all that, because you want to catch it here. No, you want to catch it in your armor if you're going to catch it.
Yeah.
I mean, you pull up a rifle with a helmet and all that on, there's not much to shoot at for the bad guy that's not going to hit armor.
So what was your primary weapon? Was it an M4 or some type of civilian variant? Did you have a backup? Were you using night vision?
No, we didn't run MVG. Our SWAT team does run MVGs. They run well, I don't want to get into too much of it, but in narcotics, we would not. For the longest time, the Metro Nashville Police Department, the only people that could have rifles were SWAT and K-9.
Yeah.
And so eventually when they had a rifle policy, everybody went to running rifles. Prior to that, we ran shotguns. We ran a Remington 870 as a point guy. Pretty devastating weapon, obviously.
Yeah.
No matter if you put buckshot or slugs in it, I mean, it's pretty offensive. But as soon as we went to rifles, I ran a rifle the whole time. I mean, there's just an M4, Colt M4, just go to there. I mean, you obviously know there's a good reason that the military uses that weapon system.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just can be very dominant.
Yeah, I carried a Beretta 9mm as a secondary weapon or sidearm on my kit, and then I carried a SOCOM version of the M4, and we had EOTech sight. But in the aircraft, one of the things our TTPs was if you're flying and you're on the controls, your rifle is usually stacked next to your seat, and then I would tie my rifle from a location on the rifle to my kit. So if we ever went down, I had to pop the door. Typically, if you're going to have a crash landing in an aircraft, it's either going to be a hard landing or you're going to be so overcome with adrenaline that you exit the aircraft without your go bag or out your rifle. So that was one of the TTPs that we had.
Yeah, smart.
Let's talk about some of the decisions you made under pressure, and if you want to give a little vignette of a mission and how you made that decision and what training helped you get to that point. I think that'd be unique for our viewers.
Yeah, there's a few, but probably the biggest one that comes to mind is calling for a moving vehicle jam at about 70 miles an hour on I-40 eastbound near the dam, approaching the Hermitage exit at 5 o'clock on a Friday.
So it's high traffic period.
Oh, and ended up in gunfire. Yeah, officer involved shooting, and yeah, it was. It was a buy takedown, and we would often buy from people, and then we'd let them leave to quote unquote cool off. You know, the days of crashing in the parking lot as soon as the deal's done and smashing cars. I mean, it's just. And so that was the plan here, and we did the deal all the way in Goodlettsville, and he got on the interstate and was, driving like a maniac. We weren't sure if he'd burned us and seen surveillance or is that just the way he was driving. But we had identified 2 out of 3 in the vehicle prior to the buy. They were violent felons. We knew that. We knew it was going to be a significant takedown whenever we took them. But they were driving so terribly that I really felt like they had probably spotted us, but that I'm not certain that they knew which vehicles, but anyway, we went all the way through town and we're heading out east and we're headed to go out of county. And obviously the further out of county you get, the harder it is to get resources that you need and communicate. And so I'd already called for aviation, right? I was a big have you guys support us guy because you can't outrun a helicopter. I don't care who you are. And so aviation was at the hangar. They weren't in the air, but they were coming. I called for them as soon as we started going through downtown. And we knew the target lived way out in like near Gallatin. And I was like, we can't let them get that far. Yeah. And so I said, well, let's get around them, get a car in front and on either side and behind them so that when we do light them up, they don't have the ability to take out a civilian car. And so we worked our way around them in traffic and lit them up. And their response was to ram the police car in front of them and try and ram the police car beside them.
So did you pit them or you just barricade them into a stop zone? Or
we literally, all 4 cars, we just locked them up and came to a stop. Oh yeah, took them down. It was, thankfully all of us had blue lights going. Of course, we're all in like Chevy Silverados and Hondas, but traffic thankfully saw what was going on and kind of slowed to a stop. But as soon as he rammed one of our cars that had blue lights going, I said, take them, jam them right now. And we had never trained for a jam on the interstate. It's a stop sign, red light, not moving.
And does that mean you just crunch his car or?
Yeah, you pin their bumpers front and back. And then you pin the driver door and you get them all out on the passenger side, typically. But I had enough confidence in my team that I did this with multiple times a week that I wasn't worried about it. That was the decision I was going to make, and that was that. And so as I'm approaching it, they've jammed them, and all my officers are popping their doors to start taking them down. I go around them and park up front, and as soon as I pop my driver door, I hear gunfire erupt, and I'm like, oh, crap.
Was it?
It
Pistol fire, handgun? What?
Handgun fire. I could tell it wasn't a rifle, and it was just one round. And so I wasn't sure if wasn't sure what was happening. So I cleared one of the trucks and obviously came up looking, and I saw all the guys in the car with their hands up.
Yeah.
And one of my officers with eyes about this wide, so I know that we had shot at them and not vice versa. Anyway, it turned out fine. The officer missed the suspect. He was sitting behind the driver, and he did this and like that real quick as the officer was coming up on him. So they ripped around right across. And again, on the interstate at rush hour, thankfully the round didn't go anywhere it wasn't supposed to. But, the after action, all the deputy chiefs had a lot of questions for me as a supervisor about making that decision. But I told every one of them I wouldn't change it now. It was the safest thing to do at the time. We can't always dictate a perfect environment.
Yeah, bad guys get a vote.
Right.
Right.
So, but that was, I didn't hesitate to make the decision. It was just, there were a lot of factors that went into it.
So the decision was to pit him?
Well, to jam him.
Jam him, okay.
Yeah, it's called a jam.
Okay.
On, moving.
Yeah.
And at rush hour on a Friday in Nashville, Tennessee on the interstate.
So the bullet missed him, and then
yeah.
you guys moved in. How did you detain the suspect?
We caught him out one by one. Everybody got behind cover, got him out one at a time. The one that was shot at was screaming, "Oh, I'm shot, it burns, I'm shot." This hardcore thug, right?
Yeah.
We get him out, add a little bit of more stress to the adventure. The officer that had been rammed that was in front of him, his sister was in town to visit and was doing a ride along with us and was in that car.
Oh, God.
She's a paramedic. So as soon as all this went down and we got them all out, got him cuffed, cleared the car, we immediately she jumps in and starts evaluating bad guy to find the gunshot wound. And of course, we don't find one, right?
Yeah.
He had 3 little tiny cuts from the glass that he was screaming about he'd been shot. And it burned. And yeah, it was, anyway. So this was, we controlled everything from the highway barrier, lane 1, 2, and 3. And so all our fire we had the dividing wall, right, as a backstop.
Yeah.
And then we had our vehicle over there as a backstop. And that's the way that jam is designed. You get them on the passenger side, you have a vehicle there also. So if it's in Gallatin Road, which we've done, you always have a backstop there because it's the car you put there. And you get them out on the passenger side one at a time. And of course they gave up. And then come to find out what he was doing this for and did this was a bag of crack that he threw under the driver's seat and almost died for it. You know, it's like.
So what was the buy for? What'd they buy?
Oh, we bought like $40 worth of crack from them. I mean, but it's felony. I mean, this was prior to being at the Drug Task Force. This was in a street level unit called Crime Suppression Unit where we did that was almost daily. Vehicle jams and door breaching was
every day.
The Drug Task Force, you'd go 3 months without doing any of it, and then you go 3 days doing a whole bunch of it, just because the kind of cases we were working were all like huge, right? Big long-term cases.
So in the Drug Task Force, where were you seeing the influx of drugs from? Was it Mexico? Was it China?
Mexico. Well, via, Mexico was controlling it. I mean, Mexico is not the source, especially cocaine, right? A lot of that's coming from South America, but the cartels are vicious and ruthless and control the border. They control everything that happens down there.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our cases would end up touching the cartels, and the cartel members, would end up moving here and, setting up shop or doing things. But yeah, south of the border was the biggest problem. And we were just then starting to see kind of a resurgence of heroin, and of course now it's off the charts, And,
it's really bad.
Yeah.
That and fentanyl, right?
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah. What are some of the habits that you still carry from all these experiences that you have garnered over the past 20 or so years in law enforcement? Is it the way that you think about preparing and planning to go do something, or is it more focused on the kit that you're taking? How do you go through those habit-forming steps, or what have you formed that's still carried with you today?
Well, obviously hyper awareness, right? And there's a big difference, or my wife says a fine line between being prepared and being paranoid. But when you have the experiences that you and I do, you can't unknow what you know. You can't unsee what you've seen. And so you walk out the door each day, I do, prepared to deal with whatever. If my children are with me and my family's with me, I'm going to make a good witness, right? But if they're not, I can't unknow what I know. So I've still got a lot of those tools with me, offensive tools and medical, both, to be able to deal with pretty much anything I run across. But every single person I see, I'm scanning. It's not a paranoia thing, but I'm always the one that can point out if somebody's carrying a gun, because I concealed a gun most of my career, right? I mean, it was not in a gun belt. It was my job to hide them, so I could pick them out. I back in everywhere I park, just because you never know when you have to leave in a hurry. And I find a second exit in every building I walk in. I don't care if it's a friend's house, if it's a restaurant, a house of worship, whatever. I always find a second exit as soon as I walk in the door. Just under stress, you're not going to be able to come up with it. But if you've identified it ahead of time, and that's all things that are just called scripting. And I know you did this a lot, playing out if-then scenarios in your head. If this happened, what would I do? You'll actually do it under stress. You won't have to think about it. It'll kind of be stored back there. So those are things that I still do to this day, is script and keep certain gear with me. You know, most places I go, I've got a 9mm, a spare magazine, a tourniquet, and a flashlight on me all the time. I mean, that's just, and a knife, just on my person.
Yeah.
Just because, you know, I always say the magazine and the pistol's for the gunfight, and the spare mag is to lay down fire to get me to my rifle.
Yeah.
Because if I haven't won it with the pistol,
you.
the spare mag is to get me to my rifle to really win it.
Yeah, I same kind of tactic and technique there. I carry a knife on me. Usually I'm carrying my sidearm concealed, and then I'll have some type of aid bag in the car, additional water, additional shoes. I always carry in my car because you just never know when you're going to be stuck somewhere and need it, or need to move on foot somewhere. So I carry some of those same things that you do. Let's talk a little bit about your time in the drug task force. I know you've done some pretty impressive things. So let's talk about that one mission that you did on the task force where you seized a whole lot of dope or cocaine, and I think that'd be pretty cool to round out the interview on.
Yeah, so the glory shot that you've seen, that was kind of the final case that I supervised, ended up being 74 kilos of cocaine, and then there's a bunch of other stuff too, but the big hits were 74 kilos of cocaine and $1 million in cash. And that was, oh Lord, that case was over a year. It was a smaller case that we kind of treated as separate, and then we spun off of that smaller case to a related but separate organization. And that one, I think we did over 60 search warrants throughout the United States, and disrupted a pretty significant flow of traffic. But, you know, we were always dealing with, you know, the sophisticated guys conduct counter surveillance a lot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they want to make sure they're not being followed. Sometimes they have armed counter surveillance, especially if they're doing a deal or there's a load coming in. And a lot of times you had to make a really tough decision, myself, and I'd always make it in conjunction with the district attorney that was assigned to us. Okay, yes, we know there's 12 kilos of cocaine that just came in. If we take this down right now, we're going to get 3 mopes, and that's it. And then all the phones are gone, and we're going to start over. So it's a balance, and sometimes you have to let it walk, which is tough. You know, it's not what you want to do. You don't want that dope to hit the streets, but sometimes you have to get. And in that particular case, early on, DEA and I were working together on it, and the DEA supervisor and I had a really lengthy discussion about not taking down a smaller load. And we eventually agreed, and it turned out to be the right decision because it was an astronomically huge organization that my guys had identified and worked on, and, you know, it was just my job to let them work and stay out of the way.
Was it a cartel organization, or was it some other type of?
No, the source were cartel members. The locals were not. I mean, they were loosely organized. But when you start getting into the suppliers, they're a lot more organized in chain of command, all of it. I mean, it's...
Yeah. They have technology. They're sophisticated in how they communicate.
Yeah, all of it. And they're, I mean, they obviously frown significantly upon people cooperating with the police. And, you know, especially south of the border, you'll pay for it big time, you know.
Yeah.
It's all about money at the end of the day. I mean, they don't care as much about their dope getting knocked off. If you knock off a load of money, it hurts them worse, you know. But again, I was glad to pass the torch. You know, I enjoyed it while I did it.
Yeah.
But it was time for somebody else to take the reins and do it. And it's changed a lot even since I retired in 2015. And this is still a way for me to give back, right? Like with Haven, you guys set out to create a product to help people feel safer. That's the same thing I want to do. I want people to feel safer and help people stay safe without being in the law enforcement world. And this is a great way to do that, is, you know, starting the company Defense Systems.
So I'll let you kind of close the interview out, but why don't you give some advice for people trying to get to the next level based on your training and your time in the drug task force? What do you recommend our viewers?
Just to the next level in life in general?
Yeah,
Or-
in life with their family, trying to go on that next milestone that they've always wanted to accomplish. What do you recommend for folks who are trying to achieve the next level?
Well, if you're not goal focused, you won't, right? Everybody has goals, but if there's not some sort of facet in your life where you can focus on them, a good friend of mine is very goal oriented. He writes them on a piece of paper and sticks them on his mirror. So he has to look at them every single day. And, you know, if you have a goal or a dream, whatever it is, just never quit. I mean, the only quit is in here, right? I mean, it's a conscious decision to quit, right? If you say, I'm not going to quit and just push forward, you make that decision, you're not going to quit. They cannot break me. Then you will absolutely achieve your goal, but there's going to be a lot of downturns getting there. I mean, you and I both hit bumps in the roads with business, and right. But what differentiates us is that we're still here. We didn't say, well, screw it. I mean, I give up. And you got to have thick skin. I mean, you're going to get more no's than you do yeses, and just understand that. But that's okay. That's just part of life.
You just got to keep pushing.
Amen. Yeah, don't let off the gas.
Yeah, that's great advice, man. I mean, certainly I know from my time in business, time in military, my episode on Shark Tank, it's just, you never got to quit, never give up. So thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Hot Wash. Thanks, Brink, for coming in.
Yeah,
I'd like to propose a toast to those who are serving and have served and those we've lost.
Amen.
Cheers. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Hot Wash. Be sure to like and share this video with your friends and family on YouTube and on Facebook. You can check us for new videos dropping every Sunday night at 9 p.m. right here on our YouTube channel, as well as havenready.com. Stay safe out there. Haven Ready for life.
Haven Ready for life.